أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. ولما جاءت رسلنا لوطا سيء بهم وضاق بهم ذرعا وقال هذا يوم عصيب. وجاءه قومه يهرعون إليه ومن قبل كانوا يعملون السيئات قال يا قوم هؤلاء بناتي هن أطهر لكم فاتقوا الله ولا تخزون في ضيفي. أليس منكم رجل رشيد. قالوا لقد علمت ما لنا في بناتك من حق وإنك لتعلم ما نريد. قال لو أن لي بكم قوة أو آوي إلى ركن شديد. قالوا يا لوط إنا رسل ربك لن يصلوا إليك فأسر بأهلك بقطع من الليل ولا يلتفت منكم أحد إلا امرأتك إنه مصيبها ما أصابهم إن موعدهم الصبح أليس الصبح الصبح بقريب فلما جاء أمرنا جعلنا عاليها سافلها وأمطرنا عليها حجارة من سجيل منضود مسومة عند ربك وما هي من الظالمين ببعيد صدق الله العلي العظيم صلوات.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Thank you for joining us this evening, and welcome to those of you who have joined us for the first time. I've run out of adjectives for Brother Muhammad's recitations, but not thank yous. So thank you so much. Just starting with some housekeeping as I do. In case of any emergency, the exits are located at the back of the chapel, the main entrance outside of the chapel, and the double doors by the dining room, where the washrooms are also located. I know you're all inside the chapel already, but if you do happen to go outside, if you could politely refrain from making noise in the corridor during the program. The noise does carry in this lovely building. For the convenience of some of our younger attendees, the conference room has also been made available. And I will now continue. This year's lecture series has been sponsored on behalf of the marhumeens whose names are displayed on the TV screen located outside of the chapel. Can we recite a Surah Fatiha for these and observe a moment's silence for these marhumeens and all marhumeens? We will be hearing a little bit later about how you can donate to the Gaza humanitarian crisis via UK registered Beta Charitable Trust. But there is still also an opportunity to donate to the programs or sponsor one of them. You can do so by going to the foyer, either scanning the QR codes on the slides or donating by cash or card. Time for Change, in conjunction with Housain, will be running a food drive for the homeless on Ashura Day on Wednesday the 17th of July in Birmingham City Centre. To donate, please scan the QR code on the TV screens. There are some now AMI related opportunities. So starting from Tuesday the 23rd of July, AMI will be hosting a weekly Quranic circle led by AMI faculty to explore the deeper meaning of the Qur'an and understand the profound insights it offers to humanity. The sessions are free to attend for all and will be held in-house and also online. To find out more or register, please visit ami.is/Quranic circle or scan the QR code on the TV screens. In these 10 nights for you alone, there is an offer available in person. You can buy all 5 books in Sheikh Arif's God Centricity series for £40 or buy a single book for £8. And some of our younger attendees might be pleased to know that the workshop yesterday night is also tonight and is being run in parallel with the main program. This is a second session and tomorrow will be the final one. The sessions focus on creating a mural on the lessons learned from Imam Hussein and Surah Al-Fajr. If we can just note that if you drop your child off to the workshop, they have to remain in the workshop until the end of the program, and they'll be looked after by the teachers during them, but after the workshop, they'll be dropped off to their parents in the chapel, after which they'll be their parents' responsibility. thank you for cooperating with that one. To register your children, please visit ami.is/Muharram-kids. Tomorrow night's program will start at 6:15 with Quran, lecture by Dr. Imranali Panjwani, Matam, Ziyarat and refreshments. That's different than originally advertised, so it's starting at 6:15. We're really lucky to have Sheikh join us for this series. And yesterday night we had a wonderful Q&A. We have the same opportunity tonight, but for more questions, we will try to start, and we will start at 10:30 with your cooperation. If we can try and get into the chapel for 10:25, then we can make sure there's a prompt start. Before I ask Sheikh to make his way to the mimbar for tonight's lecture, which is titled Divine and Human Accountability, can I ask everybody who's able to please stand up? Sheikh, during the lecture, had to stop and ask everybody to move in. So if you can move all the way forward, as far forward as possible, we'd really appreciate it. Can we recite 3 loud salawats?
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم أستغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله على محمد وآله الطيبين الطاهرين صلوات please اللهم صل وسلم ربنا لا تزغ قلوبنا بعد إذ هديتنا وهب لنا من لدنك رحمة إنك أنت الوهاب صلوات please اللهم صل وسلم Assalamu alaikum, my dear brothers and sisters. Jazakallah for your attendance, inshallah, and I pray whatever small that I'm sharing, it's benefit to all of us and we learn from each other. I wanted to conclude yesterday's topic and also shift into how the Prophet deals with reforming a community. And the reason I want to conclude yesterday, and maybe we'll spend 15 minutes doing that, inshallah, is because we concluded yesterday that in Shi'i theology, our respected Shia scholars have come up with an argument that a prophet should not sin in order for the revelation to be protected. And if they were to lie, if they were to be a hypocrite, not only we would not trust the revelation, but we simply cannot trust their character. And prophets then would corrupt revelation. Number 2, however, if you remember, there is that argument of nufur, that we should not be averse to prophets, because ultimately we would not be attracted to them or drawn to their message. And I think these are, mashallah, valid arguments. But at the same time, maybe we have gone very far or very extreme into building up a character of our beloved Prophet, or all prophets, that even normal, common human habits like eating whilst walking, eating whilst traveling, having illnesses, having different types of occupation, all of these things, if prophets are perceived to have something low, then they cannot have it. And if they have it, not only are we reducing their maqam, but actually we are being drawn away from the prophets. But the counter argument, as we discussed yesterday, is, well, why should we be drawn to someone that is so perfect? Why should we listen to them? As in the Qur'an throughout it says that Allah could have sent down an angel, but He did not. And therefore when Allah says the Prophet is uswatul hasana, the best model for us, not just the best model in what he preaches, the best model in how he lives his life, so we can try to emulate him in his trial and experiences and judgments. Salawat, please. And second point I want to make is that, inshallah, I do hope now that with the story of Yunus alayhi salam, that we find sympathy for him, not that we find, oh no, Yunus has done something so wrong that we are averse to him, but we have sympathy and understanding for one of our beloved prophets, Yunus alayhi salam, who tried his best to preach to his community. I think that's a nicer way of looking at prophets' lives. And I was having a discussion with my respected teacher, Dr. Fanai, who reminded me of something very important that I want to share with you, which is that another thing that we can add to this to make it clearer is when we look at sin of or supposed sin of a prophet or negligence, ghafla, we can remember that that sin or negligence is contextual or with respect to the prophet's circumstances and taklif. So I want to just give a simple example here. Prophet Yunus is discharged with the taklif, with the responsibility of preaching to his community. No problem, we accept that. In his eyes, or maybe in God's expectation, if Yunus were to leave the community, that could be regarded like a sin or a big negligence. But for us, I am not a prophet, you are not a prophet, and if we were to do that, if God forbid I got tired with all of you and I just left, for example, I know that's a bad thing, of course, but it wouldn't be something perhaps that God had such a high expectation for me, for I'm not a prophet that I'm guiding you to salvation. Yes, we are doing our small efforts to follow our prophets. So the expectation for me is less. So maybe, as in the case of two children, as my teacher gave this good example, which is that you would perhaps have higher expectations for your older child and lower expectations for your younger child. Sometimes my daughter says, why didn't you tell my son off? I said, Tamne yaad nathi, you don't remember when you were young, I let a lot of things slide. When you were 3 and 4 years old, you don't remember because you were young. And now, so if she sees it, she says, oh, but you're giving him a bit of flexibility. Yeah, because he is still, of course, inshallah, increasing his maturity. Well, he's more mature than I was at that age. My son was 6. So I'm giving an example that even with our children, we sometimes hold different expectations. And that's a nice way of looking at prophets, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is holding one particular prophet, maybe with higher expectation, maybe than others, or even if you say they are the same, no problem, but certainly you can say there is a higher expectation Prophet Yunus than us, so the action that Yunus did required Yunus alayhi salam in that whale to say, Subhanaka inni kuntu min al-dhalimin. Glory be to you, I have been of the unjust, or I have oppressed myself. Salawat. So, I hope I've been clear, everybody, yes? Yes, everybody? I know I'm trying to make these tough subjects just simple for everybody, and those maybe listening online and whatever, right? Now, number 2, what we haven't dealt with, which is where I want to conclude in the next 20-25 minutes, is we dealt with the moral and maybe spiritual decision-making of prophets that seem to be connected to revelation. Like if we're talking about Yunus alayhi salam and him leaving the community, that's a very big thing, because he was tasked to still preach. Same thing with our beloved prophet, peace upon him, that he held his patience and he did not retort at the time of proclamation of La ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah. Now, what we haven't dealt with is the personal judgment of prophets, or maybe the decision coming from their intellect or mind in a very specific circumstance that was not directly connected to revelation. So, a few simple examples before I give the detailed ones. Like, for example, a prophet dealing with his wives. Like, did they have arguments? For example, yes, husbands and wives would know this. I know this. Yes. I mean, can you say that the wife will say, this Muhammad was so unjust to me and was doing this and that to me? Like my wife sometimes says, okay? Or the wives will say. So our poor prophet, did he, can the wives in Day of Judgment still accuse our beloved prophet of things? So this is very personal to him, right? This is dealing with his wives, okay? Or wife of Khadija, which though when I look at the beautiful relationship Prophet and Khadija, of course, like any relationship, they struggled and things, but you think such a nice relationship in history. Even if there was agreement, disagreement, it seems to me, in my reading of the seerah, there was a lot of love and affection, a lot of sacrifice for each other there. I feel anyway, inshallah. Okay? Number two is in the Prophet dealing with his companions, or maybe in dealing with the heat of the battle. Are there things that the Prophet did where he made a judgment that perhaps was incorrect and not the best judgment, that you can't say is like a sin, but an error of judgment, and Allah correcting him and guiding him? Because our principle has been, since the start of lecture 1, this sulukun nuzul, this manner and way of revelation, that if we look at the Quran like that, all of these things, which maybe in growing up we think are very bad things that the prophets are doing, like Yunus alayhi salam, actually comes under tarbiyah, actually comes under training and teaching by the beautiful Lord and their mother, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So this aspect I want to deal with. And the reason I'm going into this is two principles. One, or two reasons. We did not deal with the Prophet's specific circumstances in his life. I dealt with Yunus alayhi salam, and I did give an example of the Prophet in Surah Al-Qalam, but I did not deal with some aspects of the Prophet's life. And the other reason for exploring this topic a bit more is all of these decisions that prophets are making are for what? Yes, you can say it's their love for Allah that they want to journey to Allah, no doubt. They have this relationship, they want to uncover this beauty of transcendence and potential they have. Salawat, please. Sorry, if some brothers can come to the front, there's a big gap. I know nobody wants to be the front student, but I see some. I don't know if women probably could go up, but if brothers want to come a bit, please, you can come, inshallah. Salawat, please. And the other reason is, apart from their personal relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they are trying to reform a society that has become ungodly and has become arguably immoral. So that means that it's not just about revelation and protecting revelation. That's one argument. The other argument is that they are in the center of society and they've got to make sometimes quick decisions or decisions in very personal circumstances in their private life, in their public life, where these decisions are very personal. In their conversations, in their interactions, likes, dislikes, how to guide a battle, a transaction. In all of these circumstances, our beloved Prophet has to be cognizant that he is attempting to correct a particular action or trend. A simple example, the way women were treated in the Prophet's society before the advent of revelation was terrible. They were exploited, they were abused, they could be used as concubines or for personal sexual relationships. Whereas when the Prophet introduced that notion of aqdun nikah, the marital contract, whether permanent, even temporary, for muta, for example, this was a way to regulate the personal relationships between men and women, that women's rights would be respected. So all my point is that he's making personal judgments about contracts, about maybe finance. He's having conversations with people. And so the very important question is, in all of these instances, doesn't Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allow our beloved Prophet to follow his personal inclination and judgment of that time? Whether it is right, whether it is wrong, whether Allah guides him. Because we said in the last two lectures, according to our Shia theologians, Allah gives qudra, ability to prophets to commit good actions and to commit bad actions. But because of the knowledge and taqwa, they don't. Salawat. So I want to give you two examples of this actually. So I'll start with this, okay? There is a beautiful verse in the Qur'an. You can see that, take off my glasses, because as you get older, short-sightedness becomes a bit less. Yes, so this is the problem. And I couldn't write these things on my notes. In Surah An-Najm, okay? In fact, let me just read it out here. Salawat, please, sorry. Salawat, please. You've all heard these verses, but I want to read it out because they're very beautiful, but from these verses we have a theological doctrine built, okay? A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim, bismillahir rahmanir rahim. Wan najmi idha hawa, by the star when it descends, ma dalla sahibukum wa ma gawa. Your companion Muhammad has not strayed, nor has he erred or like made a mistake. وَمَا يَنْتِقُ عَنِ الْهَوَى, which you all know, nor does he speak out of his own hawa, desire or inclination, the subject matter of this lecture. In huwa illa wahyun yuha, it is not but a revelation revealed. Allamahu shadidul quwa, taught to him by one intense in strength. Okay? Dhu mirratin fastawa, one of soundness, and he rose to his true form. Wa huwa bil ufuqil a'la, while he was in the higher part of the horizon, arguably indicating towards Angel Jibra'il in the ufuq that the Prophet sees or senses or feels. Now, from this, what do you find? You find actually that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying that our beloved Prophet does not speak out of his inclination. Yes, it's a very clear verse of the Qur'an. Not only that, he is taught by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So now you might say, well, what's the point of this question then? That means no. The easy answer is no. Salawat, please. Okay. The easy answer is that no, the Quran is so clear, let's end it there. But the problem is, the big problem is, that in the Quran there are instances where it appears the Prophet is making his personal judgment based on his inclination, and then you say, oh, so is that from revelation or not? Is that a contradiction in the Quran or not? And does that mean now that Allah does give the freedom and space for the Prophet to make judgment? So yes, of course, nobody is disputing that Allah taught the Quran to our beloved Prophet, peace be upon him. This didn't come from jinn or shaitan, as some Orientalists have said in their encyclopedia. I remember in my Hausa studies that we're reading Encyclopedia of Islam, that their understanding is that the Prophet went into a cave, and I remember the exact words they used in this encyclopedia, that something overtook the Prophet, as if this was like schizophrenia and these things. There is these arguments in the Orientalist tradition to try to denigrate and debase the Prophet. And this is why I'm spending time on this subject, because even by me saying these things, some people may react, no, we shouldn't enter this field. But we should, because we should respond to Orientalists who are debasing the Prophet. We're not arguing from schizophrenia or jinn or shaitan, and this is confirmed by the Qur'an itself. All we are saying is, how do we understand verses of the Qur'an where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is giving space to our Prophet to make decisions? Here are two examples for you, okay? The first one is from Surah Tawbah. This is verse 43. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Like this. وَعَفَى اللَّهُ عَنْكَ لِمَا أَذِنْتَ لَهُمْ حَتَّى يَتَبَيَّنَ لَكَ الَّذِينَ صَدَقُوا وَتَعْلَمَ الْكَاذِبِينَ. Allah says, Allah forgive you, okay? Allah pardon you. God is saying to the Prophet, why did you give permission to them when the matter had not been clarified for you about those who were truthful, and you had not known or ascertained the kadhibin, the liars? Very clear verse. So this verse, Allah is rebuking the Prophet, in a way telling the Prophet off, that Allah forgive you. So Allah is now saying, that afallahu anka, Allah pardon you, Allah forgive you. Why did you do something? Why did you give permission to these people when the matter hadn't been clarified for you about those who are truthful and liars? Now the background of this verse is that this verse came in the Battle of Tabuk, whereby some people came to our beloved Prophet and they said, we do not want to go and fight for various reasons. They were giving some excuses and reasons. And here, the Prophet listens to them sincerely, with a sincere heart. And he accepts those reasons, and he doesn't allow them to fight. He says, okay, no problem, you stay back. When they stay back, this verse is revealed, and it is revealed to Rasulullah that those people were hypocrites. They were avoiding battle, giving fake excuses, and not being loyal to the Prophet. So now, my simple question to all of you is that why did this verse come? It's very clear. Allah is correcting the Prophet. So now in Surah An-Najm, now you say, well, the Prophet did speak with his inclination and he did speak with his judgment, right? Now, how do we begin to understand this and reconcile this? Now, one option is simply to say that Surah An-Najm, the verse stands. Why does it stand? Because number one, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knew what verses were appropriate for the Prophet. Allah knows. So we're talking about God's mind. Allah knows what is relevant for the Prophet, okay? And He knows what is relevant for the community. Like we talked about Salatul Layl, yes? That people ask, well, why weren't the 5 daily prayers revealed earlier? Why go through this whole process of Salatul Layl? Well, to go from maybe a more traditional argument is just to say, God knew what is best for His community. He knew that they were not ready for the 5 daily prayers, so He put Salatul Layl there. But we just showed that Salatul Layl wasn't for the community, it was for the Prophet. So you can see that actually we need to have a discussion there. And because Allah knew what is best, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if God is telling the Prophet, Afallahu, Allah forgive, Afallahu anka, there's no reason, there's no problem with that, because Allah knows what He's doing. Okay, that is just one very simple way to look at it, which is probably the answer you and I have been given. There's another way to look at this, which is the following. Number one, okay? If the Prophet is not speaking out of his desires and out of his inclination, how can the Prophet allow hypocrites to stay back if God is guiding the Prophet? Do you see the problem here? If you're saying that God is always guiding the Prophet, then he should have known they're hypocrites, so what's the point of this verse? Why is the Prophet allowing hypocrites to stay back when he knows that that's the problem? So now, in fact, you go into a big problem area, which is now you have to say the Prophet has now committed like a sin or a ghafla or negligence. It becomes even worse then. See the problem there. And in fact, there's a greater problem than this. Even put our beloved Prophet aside, okay? The other problem is that God himself, in his mind, has either contradicted his action, or God does not possess knowledge of future events. Now you've got an even bigger problem, because now you are basically saying that if Allah is revealing the verse of the Quran, now you're saying, well, Allah didn't know that this person was a hypocrite. Allah didn't know that now Prophet was going to, that he needed to be corrected. So that means now God has contradicted himself. Does everybody see the problem here? Yes or no? Yes? Can I have a salawat please if you understand? Allahumma sallam. Okay. This is the one part of the problem. Here is another verse to also show you that it's not one verse in the Quran. You can find a few there. The next one is in Surah number 66, verse 1. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, and this is about wives, okay? Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Ya ayyuhan nabiyyu lima tuharrimu ma ahallallahu laka tabdaghi mardati azwajak wallahu ghafurun rahim. Allah says, O Prophet, why are you prohibiting, or why did you prohibit that which Allah has made halal? Why are you making something haram that Allah made halal for you, and rather you are seeking the pleasure of your wives? You are putting the wives' pleasures and desires first. Why aren't you listening to me? I didn't make this action haram. And then look at this language again. Wallahu ghafurun rahim. God is forgiving and merciful. You see, again, going back to the last few points, Allah is very honest about the prophets. He's using language of Ghafur Rahim. We may not want to say that Allah is forgiving prophets, but yet Allah is saying it. Allah is saying Ghafur Rahim to the prophets, and we are removing that from Allah's sifat for Rasulullah, okay? Now in this example, I just want to share this with you. Salawat please. Where is it gone? It is... Salawat please, sorry. Yes. In this example, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is talking about the Prophet having honey. There are different asbabun nuzul, but one is that he has honey and has something from his wives that the other wives don't like. And because the other wives don't like it, then the Prophet says, I'm not going to displease them. Some people are nodding, say, maybe you have more than one wife, I don't know. Because I don't have more than one wife. So those that have this, you know better, I don't know. All my point is that we all know that pleasing a spouse is important, especially a wife. Yes? Okay? I need to work on that, right? So my point is that surely something as human as this, as pleasing a wife or pleasing a husband, why should the Prophet be rebuked and told off for that? Poor guy is he's doing what is best as a husband, right? So that's why I gave this example that, yes, the Prophet had these real issues which we never talk about. The Prophet was trying to please wives after Khadija salamullahi alayha. Now here, Allah says, look, don't listen to your wives, not because don't listen to your wives, full stop. Don't listen to your wives because the action of having something like asal or honey is fine to do. As a substance, as a food, as something that you like, have your likes as a husband, no problem. It's perfectly fine. So maybe the real maslah is not about displeasing wives, but about don't allow a human being to make something haram that Allah has made halal for you, especially the Prophet. So in the second example, what you're finding is something more personal to the Prophet's life. It is not connected with revelation. It is connected with personal relationships, habits, likes and dislikes in the Prophet's life. And here we come to the main point. Maybe we can look at Surah An-Najm that the Prophet doesn't speak out of his desire in relation to wahi, in relation to revelation, in relation to propagation of the message, in relation to the moral character being trustworthy, which I agree with in the Shia theologians. Trustworthiness, honesty, firmness of mind. Yes, we must have these things. But when it comes to more personal situations, there is a nice space for Rasulullah. And I want to share with you one argument to try to prove this. This is from Sayyid Kamal al-Haydari. I found this argument actually. And these are in his lectures entitled Fiqh al-Mar'a. He has lectures about the jurisprudence of women on YouTube, okay? And in those discussions, he talks about the distinction between the seerah of the Prophet. That means the life, the biography, the personal actions, and the sunnah of the Prophet. So he makes a distinction. These are his words. He says, when we're looking at Surah Tawbah, when we're looking at Surah number 66, or Surah number 8, which we haven't dealt with, okay? In these surah of the Qur'an, whereby it seems like the Prophet is making a decision which turns out wrong, he says, we should not use the language of revelation here. He says, these judgments were not definitive rulings part of the Sharia. They were not. They were not part of the Sharia or Ahkam Sharia. Number one. It's not like saying that the Prophet is teaching us Salah and is teaching us Zakat and Siyam. No. In there the Prophet cannot make a mistake. Then he says that rather, and he uses very nice language, he says this was the Prophet's madhaq. Madhaq means the Prophet's personal taste or view or even trying out something. That's a nice way of looking at it. So the Prophet can have a personal like for a food. You know, we're all taught in madrasa, he likes honey and he likes dates and he likes milk and he likes perfume. Yeah, so where does this come from? Is this all that revelation coming? Is this Allah telling him, you've got to like honey, you've got to like milk? No, it's his own likes. He likes these things. And another prophet may not like that. Maybe another prophet would like something else. Right? An Indian prophet likes his chilies. I don't know. Arab prophet likes that kahwa and this. Who knows? All of these things are there. So Alhamdulillah, Allah has given us the freedom for these things, okay? And each culture will have their likes and dislikes. So here, I find this to be very beautiful because it tells us, number one, revelation should be viewed with some holistic framework which includes the Prophet's human dimensions, and those human dimensions, whether the Prophet makes a judgment that doesn't turn out correctly or likes and dislikes, it's fine. because it is not affecting the core of the revelation. In fact, I would humbly say it substantiates and proves the Prophet is uswatul hasana for us. He is the best model for us. Because if I like wearing check shirts and jeans, which I like to do, and I feel uncomfortable in a suit, that's my like and dislike, no problem, right? If I like a particular food, no problem. We should have that freedom, and we should not be so strict with that, unless of course health considerations come in. I need my chai and mandazi when I go to East Africa. I need it. I need karak chai here. Other chai is not the same for me. I need that type of chai. Now that's the way I've grown up. Prophet has grown up in another way. So let's give him that space. And in fact, there's a further argument than this. If you accept that the Prophet can make these kind of judgments, which could go wrong, what does it tell us? We don't have to be perfect at everything. In fact, when our respected ulama or leaders are making decisions, I think there are big lessons here. One, I think we should be forgiving to them. I think that's important. Whether it's president, alim, whoever, let's be a bit forgiving to them. If they are sincere and there's no pride, we'd be forgiving. Number two, although this is more of a technical point, if you have fiqh rulings, right? And fiqh rulings have changed over time sometimes. Like when my dear father and mother came to this country, like they were telling me, or grandfather, and my teachers were telling me, they could not eat from Ahlul Kitab. They could not eat from Christian and our Jewish brothers and sisters. Now we can eat from them. And now a few people are saying, like Ayatollah Nasir Makarim Shirazi, for example, and others, there's now, and I think Marhum Ayatollah Sani'i, that now you can eat from any person, any non-Muslim, provided that non-Muslim is not a kafir, is not stubborn and aggressive against Islam. If you look at their Tawdi al-Masail, you will find that some of our recent respected scholars, Shia scholars, are saying you eat from everybody, okay? That concept of najasat is not there. That najasat only comes if the person is a stubborn, aggressive kafir trying to harm Islam, or like an enemy of Islam. Now, that's not me saying, these are just the rulings in the Islamic tradition. So all I'm saying is that it's okay for a scholar or a mujtahid to try a fiqh ruling according to his ijtihad and to try to implement it. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes maybe rulings change. All I'm trying to tell you is that this should tell us that we should have a bit of flexibility in understanding religion. Our interpretation of religion will change. Our fiqh will change in the 21st century. In the fiqh workshop we had last week, mashallah, some of the respected scholars here gave papers. We had one teacher presented from my teacher Said Fatimi and my colleagues, which I want to share with you because it just tells you that sometimes what we may argue and fight about, we will think, I would love to go back to those days fighting about these small and petty issues than living 50 years later. And I'll give you this example, which he said. If you are in the metaverse, okay, so me I was a participant, I was just listening, so it's what I learned. If you are in the metaverse, where you are participating fully in this virtual reality, right? I don't know if you have a headset in or you are there interacting as you, whatever name you are, whatever character you are, and you are interacting in this virtual world, which seems very real, right? Now in that world, you meet a woman, for the men, or for the women, you meet a man there. Now you guys are married. So this is your actual life is here, you are married. Now you go there in that metaverse and you meet somebody there. You have a nice conversation with them. It's all virtual, by the way. I say virtual. Okay? It's all virtual. Now you do a nikah there. You do a aqd there. Is that nikah valid? Is that marriage valid? Does the ruling of the 4 wives applicable to metaverse? You see my point here? And I'm not taking credit for this example. My respected teacher and colleagues, they were sharing it. So I'm telling what I've learned. All I'm saying is that in the metaverse, how do you look at fiqh rulings in a virtual reality? Then what? Number 2 is that what is the concept of hijab there then? Like you're talking to people, you can see hair or not hair, or you make a character that has nice muscles, what then? Is that okay? Right? If you do other things in the metaverse, you work and you earn money and you want to convert that money into real money, does that count? Like can you now, cryptocurrency and these things, does your virtual work count as real work? And 4, if you say I'm spending time in the virtual world, then should that be counted in terms of your working hours? Should that be counted in terms of your rest? Right? And more than that, what happens to your health and your life and your routine? Now, should our lives sort of be shaped with virtual and a real life? Like how do you proportion the two? So all I'm saying is that with the challenges that we have, if we come with a very humble understanding that we are not prophets, but we are trying our level best to understand what our beloved Prophet and the Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam have left us with principles, beautiful principles, let's be a bit humble in trying to understand those principles. Maybe we'll get it right, maybe we'll get it wrong, but our niyyah is to improve society in the way of Allah. That's what the Prophet was doing. The Prophet with a sincere heart believed those people had genuine excuses, but they were hypocrites. The Prophet is trying to please his wives, not because he's not thinking of God. He is thinking of God, but he's simply trying to make the best judgment. So there is, the beautiful maslaha is like an akhlaqi maslaha actually. It's an ethical maslaha. That if the prophets were humble like that, and they were corrected by Allah, surely we too can be humble with each other and a bit more forgiving to each other, which inshallah will maybe create more unity in our society. Salawat. I want to end with one point, maybe to set up tomorrow's lecture, because I don't want to begin a big lecture. I spent more time on this point, but maybe it was necessary. My point is that when the Prophet is making these decisions, I began with that he is not making this decision just, I'm communicating the revelation and that's it. I'm saying the words, and what you do with the words is up to you. Yes, that is there. It's up to him to convey the message. But we know that in these situations like the battle, with the wives, with marital contracts, with his likes and dislikes, he is living in the society that he is reforming. You can't say that the Prophet is some monk and he's there, he comes down once in a blue moon, says a nice khutbah and goes away. That's not what the Prophet did. Prophet did go to cave of Hira, but he came out. And he came out to live in the society, which is also very important for all scholars, leaders to do. We are part and parcel of society. I am same as you, you are same as me, we are same as each other. I say that because if the Prophet is in the center of society, we need to know what civilizational or societal challenges the Prophet faced at a very personal level. Things like wine drinking, which was prevalent in the Jahiliyyah, the use of women, the use of slaves, ignoring poor people, having a male-centric and male-dominated society. These were the trends that he was with. In fact, one which I should have said, he was part of a qabila, tribe. So this concept of tribalism was there. That if somebody did something against a tribe, there would be a vendetta, there would be vengeance. This is important because even when you look at, we discussed Isma, we discussed judgment, we've discussed revelation, the way the Qur'an came down. But what we haven't discussed are the realities of societies. This is important because, as I gave the example of the metaverse, our society is rapidly changing, rapidly. So, example of metaverse, example of artificial intelligence, ChatGPT is one example, and putting things in and what's going to happen to our education system. Will we lose skills of reading and writing, or at least writing? I think maybe we'll lose that skill. I don't know. So we now have to tackle what were the structures of the society in the Prophet's time, and what type of structures were present in the previous civilizations of the Quran, like Ad and Thamud. What struggles did prophets go through that we can learn from to shape our society, inshallah. Salawat. Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. One of the respected and beloved shuhada that died on the day of Ashura, only lasting those few hours between Subh to Dhuhr, for example, and not that each shaheed died on each day, but we are taking this time to remember a shaheed. That one of those beloved shuhada was Qasim. Qasim, the son of Hassan alayhi salam. This, as some reports say in Tariq Tabari, that he was barely at age maturity, or some say beyond that, maybe 15, maybe 16. This beloved youngster is described in Tariq Tabari that when he went on the battlefield, his face was like a crescent moon. Perhaps because of the way of his turban, perhaps because of the shape of his face. In whatever way we want to say it, this person resembled the Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam. Why we are gathered here? To remember who? To remember those people. When we recite salawat, it is a salawat not just as a ritual, it is a salawat of love. Because young people, we have youngsters in the audience, think to yourselves, I think to myself, if you are a teenager, if you are even in your 20s and your 30s, even beyond that, Allah has given us life. Qasim himself decided that he would support his uncle Husayn ibn Ali alayhi salam. What maturity did it take for this person to go into the battlefield with a sword to fight soldiers? Subhanallah. As Qasim enters the battlefield, the soldiers are saying, we will attack these family members of Husayn. What hearts did they have? Did they not see that people were young? Did they not have mercy on children, on teenagers that you and I would do? Instead, their hearts were so hard that it is reported that the people said, the soldiers on the side of Shimr said, we will attack them, we will cut their heads, we will cut their hands. So even when our beloved Qasim comes, the beautiful face of Qasim, that is a resemblance of Hassan alayhi salam, comes to the battlefield, in their hearts is shaitan, in their hearts is hate. And reports indicate that the soldier, Al-Azadi, he came and he sliced his sword on the body of Qasim. Tell me, how big is a sword of a soldier and how big is a young boy and teenager? They hit Qasim. Qasim falls to the ground. Qasim falls to the ground and says, my uncle, come to my aid. Help me, oh my uncle, please come to me. Husayn alayhi salam comes to Qasim and he says, alas, I have come to your aid, but your uncle was of no help. Qasim is now close to Husayn's chest, and it is reported, and I will recite to you as much as we can say from our reports. This is what Husayn alayhi salam says, Sabran ya bani umumati, Sabran ya ahla bayti, فوالله لا رأيتم هوانا بعد هذا اليوم أبدا. He says, patience, patience. Oh, my cousins, patience. Oh, my members of my household, have patience, Ahlul Bayt. By Allah, you will not see, you will not face this degradation, this humiliation, Qasim. You will not face this humiliation that you are seeing. That blood is covered your chest. That as a young boy, your life has been taken away from you. You will not see this at all after this day. Qasim, you will reunite with your grandfather. Our grandfather, you will reunite with your father. You will reunite with our mother, Lady Fatima salamullahi alayha. Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. ربنا لا تجعلنا مع قوم الظالمين. Oh Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we ask you to please give us the wisdom and strength to understand the religion that your beloved Prophet and the Ahlul Bayt sacrificed their lives to teach us. Give us those traits of humility and forgiveness with each other, that we can appreciate difference of opinion, that we can appreciate us moving forward together in a unified way, so that our small arguments pale in comparison to the people dying in Palestine who need our help. And this is the reality, for me at least, of Karbala. Oh Allah, we ask you to please forgive our sins and our marhumin sins, and may you hasten the reappearance of the 12th Imam, Ajallahu Faraja. Surah Al-Fatiha, please. Matam al-Husayn, Ya Husayn, Ya Husayn, Ya Husayn, Ya Husayn.
يا شبان فضلات والنور لا والنور دونيكم قلبي تقطر تهدون حالي يا ثروة قادمة شهور مدين بعد يهلي بعيونكم لن يتديرون تشعرون ترضين إذ هاد من تصب عليهم الماء إذ هاد ترونيهم هل قطع شمال خابت ظنون يا ابن العتاب يا شيبي يا ابن العتاب يا شيبي يا نور الفراق تبعي يا مهجتي يا فريد يا حي يا حبيب يا ابن النبي هالوالد تسري يا ابن النبي هالوالد يا تسري فلهفي ذاك الغصن بعد اقتراني ذوايا بسيف ناحت عليه الحمام غفور واتكام دنا ضاعني كما سفري غفور واتكام دنا ضاعني الشارب جروح طريقتك يا ابن آيتي الشارب جروح طريقتك يا ابن آيتي حكيم نقض صلنا اليوم بالنور وخيرت روحي تعالى نزيد تجروح شسوي بوكم من قطع عزيز مروح شيئا فقد جسام شيئا فقد جسام شيئا
या हुसैन जब रिदा सर से चुनी मैं सदा देती रही तू ना आया गाजी जब रिदा सर से चुनी मैं सदा देती रही तू ना आया आले इमरान ने कहा और जिंदा ने कहा ये बहन के दी हुई तू ना आया गाजी जब रिदा सर मैं सदा देती रही गाजी हमको पानी ना मिले तेरी खुशबू तो रहे तेरे बाजू ना कटे चाहे मुश्किल जाची दे ये मगर हो ना सका तेरे बाजू है जुदा मुझ पर है तशनाल भी तू ना आया जब रिदा सर से चुनी میں صدا دیتی رہی تو نہ دھوپ میں تو تا شجر تجھ سے آباد تھا گر ہے برنا میرا سر کیا نہیں تجھ کو قبر اے علمدار وفا اس بہن کو بہدا تجھ سے دارستی بری تو نہ آیا غازی جب ردا سر میں صدا دیتی رہی آ گئے شام علم لٹ گئے اہل حرم ریتے پر جلتی ہوئی ہو گیا ٹھنڈا علم پرسہ دینے کے لیے مجھ سے ملنے کے لیے آ گئے بابا علی تو نہ آیا غازی جب ردا میں صدا دیتی رہی کیا سکینہ سے کہوں اے میرے دل کے سکون ہائے پانی کے لیے بہہ گیا سب تیرا خون اب کوئی آس نہیں تو میرے پاس نہیں رسی شاموں میں بندی تو نہ آیا غازی جب ردا سر سے چنی میں صدا تو نہ آیا ہم کو پانی نہ ملے تیری خوشبو تو رہے تیرے بازو نہ کتے چاہے مشکی زاچی دے یہ مگر ہو نہ سکا تیرے بازو ہے جدا مجھ پہ ہے تشنال بھی تو نہ آیا غازی جب ردا سر سے چنی میں صدا تو نہ آیا غازی آل عمران نے کہا اور زندہ نے کہا یہ بہن کے دی ہوئی تو نہ آیا غازی جب ردا سر سے چنی میں صدا دیتی رہی تو نہ آیا غازی یا حسین حسین یا حسین یا حسین یا حسین یا حسین یا حسین
توجہ زیارت السلام علیکہ یا حبیب اللہ السلام علیکہ یا رسول اللہ السلام علیکہ یا نبی اللہ السلام علیکہ یا امیر المؤمنین و سید الوسیین السلام علیکہ یا فاطمة زہرا سیدتی و سیدت نساء العالمین السلام علیکہ یا حسن المجتبی السلام علیکہ یا حسین شہید بکربلا وعلى الأرواح التي حلت بفنائك عليكم مني سلام الله أبدا ما بقيت وبقي الليل والنهار ولا جعله الله آخر العهد مني لزيارتكم السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين خصوصا أخيك بالفضل العباس بن أمير المؤمنين السلام عليكم أئمة الطاهرين من ولد الحسين علي بن الحسين ومحمد بن علي وجعفر بن محمد وموسى بن جعفر وعلي بن موسى ومحمد بن علي وعلي بن محمد والحسن بن علي والحجة الله بن الحسن القائم المهدي المنتظر. اللهم اجعلنا من أعوانه وأنصاره ومن شيعته ومن محبيه ومن المستشهدين بين يديه. السلام عليكم جميعا ورحمة الله وبركاته. صلوات.
So obviously God's omnipotent. Yeah, agreed?
Yeah.
God's omniscient. Agreed? God's
I don't know where you're going, but yeah, go on.
God's omnipresent.
Yeah.
Okay. So if he created everything and knows the nature of it, so in creating something, he knows how it will behave, how it will interact. So he's made this closed system and he knows everything and he's created everything. Then in creating something, he's effectively determining how it will act. So if there was something that he hadn't created, there'd be some variability in the system. But he's created everything. And there's nothing which is also not him as well, because everything's created from him or as part of him, or he's created something independent. So I don't know about that bit, if he can create something independent to him. So how do you understand free will in that system?
Okay, Jazakallah. My small understanding, Bismillahir-Rahmanir-Rahim, my small understanding is that the free will in that system represents the balance and appropriate design of a world in which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants for us, one, to freely make decisions with the objective of getting to know Him, not because He requires our worship, but because, as you rightly said, God is a part of us. We are simply in this world making decisions that reflect His presence. We are makers of AI because Allah is a Sani'. We have judges because Allah is Al-Adil. So there is a reflection and manifestation of God's attributes in this world, of decision making, of power, of knowledge. So all that we are seeing, and maybe you don't mean this, but maybe it's an implication, is that in your statement, it's like God and us, whereas it's simply a manifestation. So it's not that free will is something independent of it. It's simply part of His nature, which is therefore part of our nature. Inshallah, if that makes sense.
That makes complete sense, because that's where I wanted to get to.
Okay.
Great. So in the same sense, when we look at AI,
Yes.
and you look at, so it can sound like a human, right? Like Chat GPT,
Yeah.
3 didn't sound much like, sounded way more past the Turing test, right? So people, if they were just talking to independently, because it was text-based, people thought they were talking to a human. Now it can take voice and sound, and it can reply likewise in different languages, right? It can take an image and respond with an image as well. Would you say AI is conscious? Having had a little go, would you say it's conscious?
I think you can say there are degrees of consciousness.
Okay.
Because you can say is an ant conscious of his activity, yes. A plant, maybe to a very limited degree. So I think there are degrees of consciousness. We are still the most conscious beings. The question is, can you make an AI which is purely autonomous and independent? Maybe you can, but we would still be the creator and we would be able to stop that machine. So I think it is conscious to a degree, yes.
So autonomous is different to consciousness. So in the same way, when you're saying about manifestation, so I'm jumping back and forth, but same topic. So when you're jumping back and forth and saying there's a presence of God in us or some aspect or something like that, and we manifest godly features and His decision, and that's why free will, and it's beautiful the way you put it, so thank you so much. The free will is part of God's nature,
yes.
and it's not something we have, but we manifest it. In the same way that AI can be autonomous but not conscious,
Right.
is that the same way that we can manifest God's will but not God? Is that the parallel?
Yes. I think that's a good way of putting it, because if we could, I'm just thinking, I agree that you're making a distinction, right? We have those attributes, but we're not God. I'm just thinking on a slight tangent, is that it depends what you define as God, but then I think it becomes more dangerous, more sensitive, because then it's like people calling themselves God, because they feel they've manifested the attributes, and therefore God isn't like this omniscient being. It's like something you can attain by manifesting certain attributes, like Fir'aun proclaiming that, which I think is a dangerous thing. So I would stop at where you are stopping, which is the distinction. I think that in the end we make a distinction, yes, between God and ourselves, inshallah.
That was my starter for 10.
Okay,
so I'm going to go to any questions, if there's any questions. Otherwise, I do have a couple more, specifically around Ismail.
I think you just get this from movies, from a Terminator and all this. You just, and then
it's lovely, isn't it?
which I don't blame, it's good. I don't blame you for that.
Very good movie.
There's a benefit in certain
we can continue to watch.
Yes.
Are there any other questions? So I'm going to ask the one about Isma.
Okay.
I didn't see anybody put their hand up unless anybody's around the corner. So I'm going to ask the one about Isma.
Mm-hmm.
So yesterday, when you were talking about Isma, you were saying that it's a status that we could perhaps achieve.
Yes.
Is it a status that is, you achieve it and that's it?
Mm-hmm.
Or is it something that is progressive? So are there levels? So we're just talking about levels, which ties in nicely.
Yes.
Are there levels to kind of being able to gain that? Because, so once you gain it, have you completed, respectfully, the game? Like, have you ended it? Is that it? Is there a finality? So when we talked about the finality again yesterday, we're talking about there's the finality of revelation. There's no more revelation, right? After that, unless you know of something I don't, that's the finality of revelation. And you can achieve that state of Isma. And you were saying there's maybe people, you didn't mention any specific names, but you said maybe there's a teacher of a teacher who's so is it a status you obtain and achieve, and is that it? Have you won? You finished?
Yeah.
Or is it something you keep striving towards, and there are gradations of it, and you get closer? And I wouldn't say proximate just because of the last statement I made about God being omnipresent, but is there something around you achieve more and more and more, and maybe come to understand, come to manifest God more, etc., etc. Or is it just from your statement yesterday? I just wanted to clarify: is it something you just achieve and that's it? You've reached it, and maybe you have to maintain it, but there's like a red line and you've crossed the line, or is it something which continues?
No, Jazakallah. So one is that, as I gave the example, that we may have Isma, let's say, in not drinking alcohol, which I think is realistic and believable. So I think you can increase the amount of actions that you can have Isma in. I think that's one for ourselves and even prophets. Number two, in terms of achieving it and that's it, I think, no, you can achieve a discipline of patience, but when you talked about progression, when a new circumstances comes, that's still a new test and challenge for prophets. So you could be patient in your general life, but there could be a situation which tests you further, and then you develop that quality of patience even more. So you can understand the concept of patience, you understand the essence of it, like ilm and taqwa was the Shia theologian argument. And within that, there are further dimensions that you can access, like further dimensions of hikmah, wisdom, patience, in the way that one speaks. So you can understand and attain the essence of it, and then when you apply it, like tatbiq, the application of it might vary in circumstances, which means even our beloved Prophet, peace upon him, till the end of his life, you could still argue he's still developing certain traits, based on new situations which come. Like towards the end of his life, maybe issue of Khilafah and Ghadir Qum and Saqifa, things like that, where there is a Shia and Sunni discussion, how does he want to leave the community, and if he sees certain companions not listening, or maybe there's a sectarian argument, but this is just an example, right? That this, how does he deal with that? Even towards the end of his life, even after everything that he's accomplished, he wants to leave the ummah in the best way, and maybe there are certain challenges there. Then how does he deal with it? So I would still say he can still fine-tune that as well, inshallah.
So, and I thought that's the answer you might give.
Okay.
So, as a result of that,
Yes.
How do you align that with the finality of the revelation? Like, revelation is final, and we've got these new instances which occur. Is it all just contextual? Have we learned all the lessons we can, and it's now just a matter, or have all the lessons we need to have are in the Quran
Yeah.
and arguably the Hadith. You can put that envelope in there as well. Is there anything more that needs to come given how the world is changing? You know, AI, all these, outer space, the metaverse you mentioned.
Yes.
So how do you reconcile that with the finality?
Yeah, Jazakallah, that's a very big question. In my small view, there are different theories about what the Quran contains. So you can say that the Quran contains those several layers in accordance to the hadith of Imam alayhi salam. And those several layers may not contain every specific detail about metaverse and AI, but they contain principles for us to reflect on and build on. So that means finality means the message is still relevant till Yawm al-Qiyamah. One. Number two, or you can say it's not principles, it's details. Even there's details, like there are, like mysteries, for examples. And there's a batini reading of the Quran and ta'wil and all these sorts of things. And that is very difficult to comment on. Only the mystics can uncover these principles, okay? A third one, which I think is much more of the argument from philosophers, is that the Quran, the Quran has jolted or elevated human beings, and now human beings have the intellect to continue things forward. Now that's where maybe my respected teacher or others can clarify further, but the philosophers' arguments, like there are these issues that a philosopher, I'll make it very simple. The only difference between a philosopher and a prophet, or like Ibn Sina and the prophet, let's say, is that a prophet could communicate messages in a very simple way and maybe had this kind of character and traits that was attractive to people. A philosopher contains the same message but is not able to reach the audience of the prophet, communicate in the same way, and have that attractive personality. Now, the reason I'm giving this example is because in the philosopher's mind, maybe they think that the aql can reach the wisdom and the mysteries of Allah independent of revelation. I think that argument is there. Now, if we, so my teacher is nodding, that's correct. If we accept that argument, the issue then is, what's the purpose of the Quran today? Because then you can say, all, mashallah, the scholars in University of Birmingham and artificial intelligence and Elon Musk and these sorts of people, they are now the leaders of Aql, right? I think there is some truth to that argument, but I think where the issue is, the Quran gives us that moral reflection and guidance to be balanced in order that the society doesn't descend into fasad. And I think that's sometimes difficult with man-made morals and constitutions all the time, I think, sometimes. Like you can say a parliament can decide on things, intersubjectivity, and people discuss like, okay, allowing alcohol, allowing prostitution and these things. Maybe when the Quran says it is like a dhikra, a kind of reminder for us. It's a reminder of those morals and spiritual tendencies that sometimes we can forget with our human inclinations. So these are the positions, and maybe a middle ground is to say the Quran will always contain principles for us that we can reflect on morally and intellectually for our growth, but that doesn't stop us from growing and discovering things that are not in the Quran. Maybe there's like Sirat al-Mustaqim. That's a balanced path, inshallah. Yeah.
Any questions? Gonna stand up. You got one?
Muhammad wa ali Muhammad salawat. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Yes, yes, mashallah. Sure, sure. Sure. Yes, yes. So every human? Okay. Yes. Yes. Sure. Jazakallah, brother. Thank you. So for the first point that you mentioned about the philosophers go from the major to the minor premise, and so just to repeat the 2 points, I think because he didn't have the mic, yes? Shall I repeat? So the first point was that the philosopher's way of receiving knowledge is different because the Prophet receives wahi, and obviously they go through the, mantiki sort of way, the logical way. And 2 was the Quran has a male-centric theme, if I've understood you correctly. Women sacrifice for men, and there are examples that you gave about Musa alayhi salam and others, and you said that scholars can cherry pick verses. And so how do you you asked me, how do I justify, let's say, I didn't feel this is what you mean, like a female being a prophet, or maybe a female having a more dominant role in the society? Is that where you're going? Like, is that the implication of your, like, how do you said that the Quran is a male-centric theme, so I'm asking, what's your implication of that? Maybe you can answer that before I...
Cherry picking these verses and telling these verses is what Quran conveys.
Yes.
You overlook the thematic approach towards. So rather than just singling out few verses
Yes.
and saying this is what Quran says, you overlook a major portion of what how the topic has been dealt in this, and that is one of the limitations.
So the method of understanding the Quran. Okay, fine. The method of understanding the Quran in its themes and not to cherry pick verses. Right. So I'll just answer two things. One is that, of course, I agree with you that the philosophers use the approach of mantiq, and that's why I said that philosophers believe they can, and I'm not saying this is my argument, I'm just giving the philosopher's argument, they believe they can attain the level of knowledge, let's say, of the Prophet. But I didn't say they did it quickly. I in fact said for them, they can't do it in the way the Prophet does it, which is communicating the message succinctly and these sorts of ways, which are which is a lut of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So a philosopher, to respond to your point, would say, yeah, I have no problem going from major to minor. I'm not proclaiming I'm a prophet, and I don't want to be. But I do proclaim that I can reach high levels of knowledge and guide the society, but not in the way the Prophet does. I'm just saying that's a response to your argument. So there's no contradiction. They agree. They are going from major to minor. They agree. And they also respect wahi. They do. And they learn from the wahi. But their understanding is, as philosophers, Allah has given them that power, that qudra, to also seek knowledge, to also help and guide us. Take Ibn Sina. Ibn Sina writing a book on medicine or logic or philosophy and being a physician. You think this person is multi-skilled. You think, how did this person get the grace of Allah? So perhaps in the philosopher's mind, they believe Allah has given them the lutf to achieve these stations of knowledge that the Prophet has, not as a matter of disrespect to them, no. As a matter that the goal of the wahi is to give human beings the confidence and potential to reach their abilities. I hope you understand that. It's not like they're fighting against the prophets. It's that they believe they've got the potential. Number two, in response to the thing about themes. Well, first of all, the fact that you have talked about themes of the Qur'an is already an assumption. That is, you are speaking from place of fact. It's not a fact. When we are saying that prophets are male, no problem. But just because there is a fact doesn't mean there's a value attached to it. That's a philosophical argument. If you have a fact of gravity or a fact of oxygen, whatever it is, it doesn't then mean that naturally indicates on the meaning that you and I are ascertaining. Maybe there is that meaning. Maybe there are 2, 3, 4, 5 meanings as to why there's oxygen and gravity. All right? Indicates to a creator, indicates for the running of the world, indicates for people to live, for the growth of the plants. Do you see my point here? So first of all, a fact could indicate on different meanings. I'm not disputing that the prophets are males, not at all. But let's take the thematic approach. Then in Surah Al-Ahzab, you have verses which talk about mu'minina and mu'minat. You have verses that talk about the elevation of women, like in Surah An-Nisa. At the same time, you have verses about male authority, which I agree with. So the first point is, when you say theme, you're assuming that everything is a theme without exceptions. Or two, the verses that you have chosen about the prophets, so then what about other verses which talk about the spiritual capabilities of men and women? So I'm not ignoring your theme. All I am saying is you've got to look at the Quran in a balanced and contextual manner. That's all. So in today's lecture, I talked about Surah An-Najm, yes? That the Prophet doesn't speak out of his desire. And I was very objective. I said this is one argument, that the Quran is always, the Prophet is always speaking from Allah. But the counter argument, and I'm being balanced, I'm not cherry picking. What about, how do you explain the verse that I quoted in Surah Tawbah, in Surah number 66, in Surah Al-Anfal? How do you explain those? If I go by your method of theme, then I'm just ignoring those verses because it doesn't fit my paradigm. And then I'm being biased. I don't want to be biased. I want to relate to you all verses that I can, and I've been very objective, and give you one argument and this argument. Because remember, in the Quran, we might think things are inconsistent, or we might impose our assumption, but I don't want to do that. So I'm not disputing your theme. I'm just saying that what you've picked might have different meanings. You're assuming that women have sacrificed for men. Well, then Prophet was sacrificing for Khadija, working under her. Prophet sacrificed his male status for her. He allowed her to be a financial leader. He allowed her to make decisions. And that is well documented in Sirah Nabawiyah. So I'm just asking, how does that fit in with your theme then? How do you explain that? That's all. Mm-hmm. Yes.
The Prophet had to work because Abu Talib he didn't have a job at that stage. So
Yes.
it's not the same.
Yes.
First of all, and secondly, when I say thematic, is that to look at the whole picture.
Yes, I agree.
Not just one picture for the derivation of ethical rules. Yeah, that was my. And sometimes the other parts are overlooked just because they don't fit the paradigm.
But I agree 100% with you. In my small approach, I'm laying out to you verses of the Quran. And I'm not saying, well, this one fits in I don't believe that. I'm being objective in saying that if Salatul Layl is revealed, why is it revealed? I'm not just saying, well, Salatul Layl is revealed because it's an obligation. And if I'm talking about maqam of women, you look at Lady Maryam. You see, if she's speaking to an angel, if she's receiving wahi, if she's giving birth to Prophet Isa alayhi salam, we also have to say what is in herself, in her spiritual capability that allows that. And you can't just say she didn't have a husband, so who is she sacrificing for? And God bestowed upon her this beautiful prophet of Prophet Isa. So all I'm saying is, maybe you're looking at the Quran as if, okay, this X, Y, and Z is final and that's it. Whereas maybe the prophets there are to tell us, look, humanity is changing, and in the prophet's time humanity was changing. How are you now going to deal with the fact that today women themselves are more intelligent at times than men? How will we deal with that? Now, are we going to say that, no, that doesn't fit the Quranic paradigm, that men are only prophets? It doesn't make sense. That means Allah, through His lutf, has allowed humanity to develop. So how are we going to deal with these challenges? You can only deal with it if you reconcile those verses that you just said, that prophets are males. You have certain verses about women. You have certain figures in history that are female. And I agree with all X, Y, and Z here. I agree with it. All I'm saying is, how do you make sense of it in the 21st century when we want the guidance from the Quran and Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam, we want to be balanced. And if a woman says, well, why should I seek permission from my husband? Okay, simple example I'll give you. If they are saying that, is that wrong of them to say that they reject that? No, because in that society, women didn't have any rights. Women were treated a bit like slaves in a way. They didn't have that status. If now a woman is thinking, well, I'm earning, I am being educated, I'm making this, do I really have to ask my husband every time I go out of the house? So remember, the rules that you're indicating about women sacrificing for men is based on context. You're assuming that context is from Revelation. It is not. That context is Arabian society. You put it in your theme as God has made that as the case. No. God didn't make that. The Arabs had that custom. That's my point. I don't know if I'm making sense. I'm not disagreeing with you. All I'm saying is maybe you can look at it from these perspectives which are there in the Quran. That is all. Sorry for the long answer.
No.
I had to spend time to unpack that. Sorry.
So I've understood two things from that. There's many perspectives, and correlation isn't causation, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Is that fair?
Yeah, inshallah.
Because you can pick whichever theme. You can say this is a theme, but how do you really know it's a theme? So you have to look at
and how do you correlate with others? Inshallah.
So I think both of you are doing something very, very difficult. And maybe to understand the methodology where you're looking at context, I think I mentioned to you personally after the lecture, it's trying to understand the context, not assuming that was the intention of the Prophet. Because we can't assume that was exactly how they felt. It might have been a way that they feel a person felt when the revelation was happening, or in a hadith that this is the reason a person was working for them. We don't ever know, right? So there's a level of uncertainty.
Inshallah. And of course, Allahu A'lam, Allah knows best. So we are humble in learning.
Are there any other questions? Got any other questions?
Assalamu alaikum, Shaykh. Thank you very much for your series and all the work that you've put into it. It's been very enlightening. Thank you. We did have a brief conversation a couple of days ago about this question.
Yes.
But I just thought it might be useful to get other people's opinions as well. So your main theme is that the Prophet developed as a human being throughout the revelation process. And as a result of that, there are verses in the Quran explaining all of that. So there are a couple of parts to my question. The first part is, how do you reconcile the humanness of the Prophet with, the part in Hadith al-Qisa which says, the whole of creation was created for these people who are the Nur, and if it wasn't.
Yes.
So that's the first question, the first point. The second point is, do you think that you could reconcile those two perspectives? I mean, for example, in the Quran, it also describes the Prophet as Noor, right? So can you sort of reconcile those 2 points by looking at it in this way? You know, the Prophet said to companions that if Abu Dhar understood how Salman understood religion, he would regard him as a kafir, right? There's a hadith about that. So there are different grades of understanding. And, you know, like you say, the mystics have a different interpretation of the same verses that you point out as perhaps a guidance for us rather than as an admonition to the Prophet. And, you know, I think one of your main themes is that maybe that's not the correct way of looking at it, and maybe we need to be honest with ourselves and look at the verses the way they literally are in the Quran. So do you think that, you know, I find it, I mean, obviously what you're saying is a challenge because we've been brought up from early childhood about the Isma and the greatness of the Ahlul Bayt. So how do we reconcile that position to what you're saying? Is it a question? Is it a matter of grades of understanding, perhaps?
Yes, no, Jazakallah, God bless you. So I think that I did give some answer of this yesterday, I think, with this hadith on light and things. One is that I think we are starting from a position that is not always Quranic, and this is the biggest problem. We're starting from a position that is hadith based. And unfortunately, as has been recorded throughout history, that we have had gulat hadith in our books. It is very well documented, and we even know at the time of Ali ibn Abi Talib al-Islam, he suffered from these kinds of people, right? So I think the problem is that, and I'm not saying you, but when you start from a position that the world is created for them, or they're created from light, the first problem is the Quran doesn't have this discourse about prophets and human beings. It doesn't. And I gave verses, Ana Basharun Mithlukum, or the Prophet doesn't know the treasures of Allah. All these things are there. So I think the first point is you can reconcile it by starting with the Quran. And if a hadith conflicts with the Quran, that hadith should be rejected. Number two, as I gave an example about the Prophet being created from light, I said this kind of hadith is not found, at least from the perspective of tafsir, in some tafsirs, or if it's there, it's not really used by the mufassir in his or her analysis. So now that you beg the question, which is, well, how come one mufassir is using this hadith and another one doesn't? Maybe they are questioning the authenticity, maybe they believe it's against the Quran, or maybe they believe it's not a realistic reflection of the Prophet. Three, however, if we want to accept this hadith, no problem, provided that if you want to say it's about their transcendence, their great spirituality, their maqam, I think there is no issue there. But if we are talking about the very substance and essence being nur, or them being selected beforehand, I think there are questions about God's adala. And then it turns into theology. Even if God's mind, he had this, no problem. But to kind of say that only for the sake of few people, the world is created. So then you say, well, what about the other prophets? What about other people? It seems to go against the Quran saying that Allah is just, and Allah is Ghafurur Rahim, and Allah is guiding us. It seems to go against these verses. So I would just reconcile by saying these kind of hadith are more about the position and spiritual ability, and in a way the transcendental ability of prophets and Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam. Others, of course, may have a different view, inshallah.
So I think that may be the penultimate question. If anybody has one more.
Assalamu alaikum. You know this verse in the Quran, am I not your Lord? Alastu bi rabbikum.
Yes.
And then, so I've heard somewhere that Prophet says that I was the first one to say Bala.
Yes.
Yes. So does it mean that at that very time he was at that position of being a pure banda of Allah, and this is why Allah bestowed all this speciality on him?
Yes, yes, there is that argument. Yes, in the Al-Muddar, that, yes. So, yes, that verse is there, and I think you can make that argument if you want to say the Prophet was the first one to say yes, okay? And that's fine. I just feel that maybe we can only uncover that reality maybe through a mystical way. Like, if we want to advance that argument, we have to have some kind of basira about that world, how it functions, and that we can find some tools in the hadith that demonstrate the Prophet was the first one that said yes. But that also means that we either said no, or we said yes afterwards, or we were not of that capability. That is fine. I think you can say that. I just feel, I think that can be uncovered in a more mystical way. But if we accept the Quran is meant to be a guidance for humankind, it's meant to be accessible to all, it seems to me, why would God make religion and following the Prophet that complicated? It seems to me that this is something very esoteric, very irfani, which I'm not denying. Maybe you're right, but I feel God wants all of us to come to Him in a very fair and just manner. That to me is a God that I would believe in, and a God that I don't understand, and a God that there's some conversation with our beloved Prophet, peace upon him, might be a source for people to reject the message. And I know there are atheists, Richard Dawkins, all this, they reject religion on the basis of this. They say all of this is like fairyland and fairies. And that's why I'm being very sensitive and respectful to our Urafa, but I think we have to look at the wider picture here. People reject Islam and religions because of this point, by the way. Inshallah. Yeah.
Thank you so much. I think a loud salawat for Sheikh is due. Wow.
No, sir. Thank you, sir. Thank you.
If we can finish with the Surah Fatiha for all marhumeens, it'd make me very happy.